Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at the British GE premiums that are on sale, obviously, over the next few days. The British have a bunch of ground vehicles that are GEs nowadays, but they haven't really changed too much, I suppose. Starting off with the A13 Mark 1, this is just a special one with a special camo for the standard Mark 1 over here. Mark 1's fine, it's just not survivable at all, and really relies on getting the first shot off compared to the enemy, and generally that works, apart from a lot of very meta vehicles of this BR are autocannon wielders, like stuff like the Panzer IIc, so can be pretty hard to use. So I'd probably say no on that one. The Independent, the good old A1E1, this is another one of those land whales that has been added to the game. It's quite expensive for what it is, since it is not a very useful vehicle, but the thing is about it, it used to be one of the oldest ground vehicles in the game, but now it isn't, so it's even lost that. So basically, it doesn't really have any redeeming qualities, apart from the fact that it looks kind of cool and also looks very World War I-esque, and I know a bunch of people like that kind of style, but if we're actually talking about usability and also these land ships, just use something like the SMK or the T-35 if you want to get your rocks off. The Crusader Saint is fantastic. It's just a Crusader with a special camouflage on it. We've talked about it previously. You can see it has like the Saint here. This is part of the starter pack, and it's insanely powerful and insanely positive. It has a really nice setup on it as a general vehicle. It has access to a stabilizer for the 2-pounder, good penetration on the 2-pounder, also a ton of smoke grenades, which it launches out the top here, and then also at the same time it has scouting. So it's just a really nice rank 2, works really well, and there's a reason why the Crusader is one of those that's been exported to a bunch of different trees, because it just does its job well. You then have the Cromwell 5 RP3. Now, this is just a standard Cromwell, the 75mm one, which has access to the rockets, the good old RP3s. Now, this is definitely something that will appeal to some, but for me, I don't really see it as that useful, if I'm honest with you. Like, the RP3s themselves are pretty bad in general. They don't pen a lot. They have a lot of overpressure potential, which is quite nice, but that's really about it. For me, when I look at this, I actually prefer running the 2 Cromwells plus the Sherman 2 on top of it, or maybe the Achilles or the AEC instead of the Cromwell 5. So it doesn't really fit in the lineup that I personally have, but generally I suppose you could always just kind of, you could replace the standard Cromwell 5 for it, but I don't think it's worth kind of going for in that way. The next vehicle is the Sherman 1C Trizniak. I would say this one is worth it. It's a complete copy of the standard Firefly, and the only difference is, of course, the camo, once again, that you can't see because of the add-on armor. And it has the 17-pounder, has a nice 50 cal on the top, and the 17-pounder does have a very good penetration and also decent post-spin damage. The only issue with this vehicle is the gun depression isn't the best, and it's a pretty tall vehicle, so that can kind of get in your way, but you do have quite a nice lineup around it. You know, you have the Istavak, the Avenger, the good old Churchills, and then also the standard Sherman Firefly, and the Concept 3, which I still think should be slightly higher in BR than it actually is. So I actually really like the Trizniak. It's one of those which also gets used a lot in Pages of History events, which for me is very important because I like following them and getting them done. The AC4 is an Aussie vehicle. It's once again got the 17-pounder, and also has the Shot Mark 8, so you don't get an increase in firepower, showing how good the gun is of the Trizniak at the BR that it actually is. The vehicle has some trolley armor on it, and also at the same time it has a decent engine on it. It just can't really reverse like a lot of British vehicles, but generally it will do okay at the role that it's kind of designed for. It does have a 7.7mm machine gun to back it up, but I think overall this vehicle is fine. It's got good gun depression, good mobility, good targeting speed, and all of that good stuff. The only question is, do you take it over the Comet, which is at this BR? You definitely take it over the Challenger, but the Comet's a pretty decent vehicle, but it does rely on the APDS. The Bosvark is also nice to run with it too, so I honestly think you probably take it just for that stuff. At 7.7, you have the Centurion Action X. Now, this one is a good one. It's a stabilized 20-pounder, you know, the ones that you find on the Centurion. It has a turret which has some weird angles on it, meaning that a lot of people struggle to penetrate it. And then also it has the Centurion chassis, so it has good mobility forwards, backwards, and decent amount of armor too. Also has the Shot Mark 3 APDS for good penetration, and the Shot Mark 1 to be able to do some damage too. Overall, I really like the Centurion Action X. I really like the Centurion in general in War Thunder. I think it fits at least my playstyle very well, and just feels really nice to go ahead with. Another vehicle that does that actually is the Vigianta. So the Vigianta is very similar to the Vickers Mark 1 and the Mark 3, which means that it is an L7 platform with a really fast reload, which is what all these Vickers machines are about. It has very good target rotation, has the 2-plane stabilizer, has very good mobility on it too, thanks to the transmission and engine combo. It also has a pretty crazy reload, which is a lot better than most of the other L7s that are around the place, and also good gun depression, and it has a 50 cal on it as kind of like a ranging gun right here. So the vehicle has access to all of the nice things that you want. It doesn't have access to a lot of armor, but since this vehicle gives you a platform to be able to shoot first in pretty much every occasion, that's all you have to do to make it as useful as possible. It's a really nice vehicle. All the Vickers vehicles, or even all the way to like the highest end Vickers vehicles, like the Vickers Mark 7, feel really nice to use. Unlike the Khalid. The Khalid is a Centurion which has access to a boosted engine, which is something which is nice. You know, it's something that, you know, we've talked about in the past that the Chieftain needs in general, but the other thing the Chieftain needs is stop being chronically over BR'd. This vehicle has access to the L23, which is a nice round, but it's also worse than a lot of the other rounds that we have at this BR. Doesn't have access to thermals, doesn't have access to crazy good optics, doesn't really have access to any of that stuff, and because it has this 120mm gun, it also has a longer reload than all of the other guns like the L7s that we see around this area. So it does have a lot of advantages compared to other ground vehicles that are around, but the disadvantages it has in the form of the reload, in the form of the fact that its armor is useless, and also in the form of the fact that it doesn't get thermals or anything to that nature, really hampers this vehicle to be very good. So it's time to have a look at the aviation side of Britain, and they have a ton of G vehicles. I didn't realize how many premiums Britain actually has, but it is just a nuts amount when you actually have a look at it. To start off with, we have Tux Gladiator. This is just a Gladiator with a nice skin. The Gladiator is quite nice. I don't mind it. I don't think it's as good as the CR-42 or the I-153 for the good old Soviets, but it's okay. Like, it does its job well, and if you want to go around in arcade and fly around and zip-zoobity dip about, you can have a great time with it. The next one is the Wirraway. Now, the Wirraway, I would say it's more style points than anything else. I mean, it is nice to have a loadout of 2.500s and 2.250s in Naval or Ground 1.3, but to be honest, it's not going to be one of those that takes a lot out of you. It's an Australian vehicle, which is pretty cool, and has access to a bunch of different armaments, which is really nice. Engine injection as well for the engine, which, well, it doesn't have a ton of power behind it, and also has the 7.7s too. It's a fun little CAS vehicle. It works really well. They also updated this model more recently, probably because they're going to add it to Enlisted, or if it's not already there, but it's just cool to see and generally feels pretty nice. The other thing as well is they updated the model of the Boomerang, so it might be worth thinking about. Maybe they're doing stuff with Australian vehicles, maybe something's coming. But oh well, you know, that's in the back pocket. The next vehicle is the Hudson Mark V. So the Hudson is a American-born vehicle. I wouldn't say it's very good, if I'm honest with you. It's not something which really tickles the fancy. And that's just because it's a hodgepodge. It doesn't really have a set of weaponry that really fits it very well. It does have this weird, 4-250, 6-100, and then AP rocket things. Doesn't have access to secondary loadouts yet. I'm sure it will in the future. But I've got to be honest, even at 2.0, there's a bunch of bombers which have much better loadouts than this, and also would be much better CAS elements because they're usually about the same speed, but also not as chunky or not as big. One of them, which is the Havoc, right? Like the Havoc doesn't have great guns, it only has 7.7 Brownings, but it has a lot more speed, and it also has 4 500-pounders that it can carry along, plus good defensive turrets in specific places, like the 2 7.7s that turn up, one in the bottom and one at the front. But the main survivability of this thing is actually its speed, so this one can actually work really well in a lot of places. Would highly recommend this one if people really like these types of vehicles, and also because there is the Havoc, the Boston, and also the DB7, and I think this is actually the only available one out of these three right now, which I've always found a little bit weird, definitely a bit odd. You do have the Avenger Mark II. This got actually updated also as a vehicle. It's fine, it's just a bit heavy and a bit chunky. Does have the nice torpedo though, so you can use it pretty effectively in Naval, and then also has the 2,000-pound bomb, which can also do a ton of damage to a specific thing. So if you're looking for a CAS element for ground or naval, not too bad. For air, I mean, it's not very useful, is it? Then you got the Spitfire, the Mark IIA Venture, the 1. This is just a standard Spitfire Mark IIA with a camo. This is in the starter pack. Just pick up the starter pack so you can get this and the Crusader Saint and extra stuff on top of it. This one is super powerful, really fun to play. The only thing you have to watch out for is burning out the engine, but as long as you're keeping an eye on the temps, it ain't too hard to do. So definitely pick that one up. That one's a lot of fun. The Corsair, we talked about this in the Japanese tree, still really powerful here. The hilarious thing about this one is it's still 2.7, by the way, whereas a lot of the other Corsairs, which have a similar setup to it, are actually 3.0. It just got missed. And also, at the same time, it gets a 1,000-pound bomb on top of the fact that it has the good old Universal and Stealth 50 cals with 2,000 rounds with 6 guns. It's really nice, it works really well, and it's a fantastic vehicle, really good for grinding out SL mainly and just kind of having a good time. The next vehicle is the Boomerang. Now, they removed the Boomerang Mark II, which seems a little bit odd, but the Boomerang Mark I is still there. It's a completely fine vehicle. The major issue with the Boomerang is it relies on being maneuverable because its engine power isn't there enough, and a lot of the times you can actually do really well with it, especially in arcade, but in realistic you do struggle because a lot of energy fighters got moved down over the years, and it is nowhere near as powerful as it used to be because now you go up against a lot of vehicles that have way more power in the engine than you, so you can just get outrun quite a lot. The Hellcat Mark II is nice. This is actually quite nice to see because the standard Hellcat, the F6F, got dropped in rank in the American tech tree, which sucks because you can't use it in the lineup anymore. You can use this one though, so you can use the 2,000-pounder in ground or the naval torpedo, and generally it once again is pretty good with all of the wonderful rounds that it has access to for the 50 cals and the amount of ammunition as well. Since it's an American vehicle, it has a ton of it on board, so it works super well. On top of that, you also have the Thunderbolt, which just has the same thing as the Hellcat at 3.7, just has a really powerful engine, has more guns, and is able to have a bit more firepower, but also is just a fantastic high-altitude interceptor. Plus, it has access to secondary loadouts, so you can bring the 500-pounder, you can bring the thousands, and also they now drop independently. So this can get 3 guaranteed bomb drops off in naval or ground. Insanely impressive as a vehicle for that. The Mustang Mark 1A also turns up as a vehicle, which is about the place. It's at 3.3 at the moment. The one thing I like about the Mustang, tons of camos. I actually ground out all of these camos, and then they took them away from me. very rude. But basically, you have a ton of camos to grind out with this vehicle. It has the 420mm Hispanos, which is decent in air. You know, you can annihilate a lot of stuff. But in ground, you can see here, it actually pens quite a lot. So if you top down with stuff like the Hispanos, you can do a lot of work with them. And also, it is generally designed more as a ground attacker, but this can definitely fill the air superiority role against a lot of vehicles. The next vehicle can't. It's fat. It's the good old MB5. Look at that good old what is it, contra-rotating propeller, I think is what it's classed as. It's heavy, it's fat, it's clipped, winged, but in a straight line, my god, can it be beaten? Well, yes it can, but at least it is quite nippy. It also has Hispanos, but only Mark IIs and not Mark Vs, and they scatter around the place, especially when it comes to controlling this machine. Generally, this is a poor one. Somehow it actually got itself a user camo. I have absolutely no idea how that happened, but there you go. It actually has itself a Royal Navy camo as well. This vehicle is cool. It's an interesting one. It also has a really cool history, the good old Martin Baker, but also at the same time, I wouldn't say it's very good. Then you have the Spitfire F Mark 14C, which is this one right here. You have a bunch of Griffin Spitfires, which are all really powerful. This one is also really powerful. The difference between this and a lot of them is that it still has the 7.7s instead of having the 50 cals. So if you prefer the 50 cals, it might be worth going for a different version, but this one still can do a lot of damage. It can still, you know, stick to enemies. The thing about the Griffin Spits is they're not bad at anything. They're good at climbing, they're good at turning, they're good at retaining energy, they're good at just everything when it comes to air superiority, so they work really well. And if you've never flown them, I highly recommend them. They're super fun to play. Then you have the Hornet. The Hornet Mark 1's okay. I would definitely say just play the Hornet Mark 3. They're basically the same. I think the tail's slightly different. But the vehicle is supposed to be a higher altitude interceptor, so going after bombers and stuff like that. And it works really well, especially since a lot of the time in Air Realistic, you just go against Ju-288, so you just blow them out the sky when they're not looking or when they're scripting. And it has the Hispano Mark 5s. They hit like a truck, they're all centrally mounted, works really well. And it technically has a secondary load that it can bring for stuff like ground and naval, but there are better options like the Tempest in my opinion, just because it's slightly better at dogfighting than the Hornet itself. So if you like a big air realistic banger, it's pretty good, but otherwise there are better options. You have the Attacker FB2, which once again has a slightly different tail to the one in the tech tree. This vehicle's fine, like it works really well. 2 1000s again for ground. The Hispanos are not in the center, so you do have to worry about the good old targeting of them. But the main thing about this is I've always enjoyed this vehicle, and I feel like other people haven't, and I don't know why. I don't know if it just fits, you know, how I play the game or how I approach it, but it just feels really nice to do. Like, it's one of those which turns really well and also keeps its energy in a decent way and just feels nice at 7.0. Obviously, there's a bunch of vehicles at 7.7 that are super good against it, but that's pretty much like every BR, right? Like, you're always going to have stuff which outdoes it. The Seahawk, well, you have the Meteor F Mark III as well. This thing, I mean, unless you use it in ground, it's not really useful, because the main reason to use it is the bombs. If you're not using it for the bombs and you're using it for anything else, it's completely useless. And since there are some better bomb trucks at this BR, just use those bomb trucks instead of using this. It has a nice camo, so there you go. You got bling bling points, but it also just means it's much easier to spot you when you're in the air. The Sea Vixen is a different shade, though. It is slightly more fun, in my opinion, because it offers a playstyle you don't really see at 8.7, which is the more missile meta playstyle, which is more something that turns up 9.7, 10.0, 10.3. So you turn up, you try and wait for people to go slow, and you are able to just missile them while they're engaging other people. Does need some setup, obviously, since, You know, you aren't just one of those vehicles that can just fend for yourself, but in those type of situations, it feels really nice to actually play the vehicle and have a good time with it. It is also quite fast, so it's actually one of the fastest vehicles at its BR, which is really nice. And then also, last but not least, you have the Harrier GR1. So this got nerfed like into the ground. Like I don't know what else to put it. They put it up in BR twice, which really hurt it. But then they changed how missile mechanics worked, which really hurt it. And now it's just a fat Harrier with no countermeasures against some very, very powerful missiles at the BR. You could use it effectively as a bomb truck, I suppose, if you want to hit bases. But generally, it's not something that's going to do really well. And I would say it's just in a bit of a tough spot, especially with the fact that the SRAMs are nowhere near what they used to be, and they just started adding vehicles which were just way better around it. It's just, it's in the doldrums right now, definitely not really worth it. There are much better options in the tech tree. For helicopters, you do actually have one available for Britain, which is the G-Lynx, and I'm sure the Royvalk will also go on sale in the general thing as well. The G-Lynx being a 10.3, you may think, well, why is it so first of all expensive and high BR? And it's because it actually has a really cool set on it. So it has like one of those setups where it is a super nimble vehicle. It used to be the most nimble and fast vehicle in the British tech tree, and also the weaponry is really nice on it. The only issue is its survivability. Well, you still get, you know, a decent amount of survivable things, including the countermeasures and of course the RWR, so you can see if anything is tracking you. The vehicle has stingers, it also has Hellfires, and it has MVDs. So you can bring 8 Hellfires and then a bunch of stingers, or even a 20mm if you want to, which makes it pretty nice in my opinion to use. And since it's a premium, you don't have to bother with the TOW 2s. It also has some really good optics on it, because you're going to be not too far away from the action, but far enough to be able to, you know, take stuff on. I really like this vehicle, you know, super nimble, super fast to go around the place and just have a good time with. Definitely worth the pickup if you like the BR. Also at the same time at 10.3, you do actually have a pretty nice ground lineup too. The Vickers Mark 7, the Challenger Mark 3 as well, and the Stormer HVM all sit at that BR and will work very well with it, including even the Bishma. The naval side of things for Britain, I feel like are actually kind of lacking. After looking at what vehicles are actually available right now, there isn't a ton of them that I would actually suggest. Like, there's a metric ton of them like kind of sat here, right? But most of them are not available, or their Battle Pass stuff, or their event stuff, and just generally wish they were kind of available. A lot of them are just low tier stuff. There's only 3 blue water things available. You got the Montgomery, the Valhalla, the Jervis, and then of course the Belfast itself. Like there really isn't a lot. I suppose you have the Verdun as well. So basically you have like these 3, the Jervis, and then all of the rest are just hidden stuff, and then the Belfast. Then of course the Iron Duke, which is higher up as well. So the Verdun, it's a V-class, and this is very similar to what you see from the Vega, and what kind of revolutionized the start of the British tech tree. Instead of having to deal with the Churchill, which was easily the worst starter vehicle for any nation when it came to its destroyers, you then got the Verdun, and also the other one which gave you access to the 4.5-inch guns, or the 102mm, which just have a very good fire rate and are able to just put out damage at a really good click. The premium is exactly the same, and you can also get AP and VT, which is super nice for it. So overall, the Verdun is a very nice pick for this. Then you have the Montgomery. The Montgomery is just a town class, so it's the same as the Churchill. I don't know why anybody would buy this. I have no idea why this is even still here. I'm guessing it was hidden, but so therefore it probably isn't even available for sale. No, it still says it's available for sale. Don't buy this. You are wasting your money, even though it is a small amount. It is a completely worthless vehicle because it has access to 3 single-mounted 4-inch guns, which, you know, you have obviously the main gun here, and then you have 2 on either side, so you can basically only get 2 main guns on at the same time. You have two dual 12-7s in the center, and then you have a 300 on the back and some torpedoes. It's awful. Don't bother with it. It's the same issue with the Churchill. They even tried to add guns to the Churchill it didn't have to make it useful. Still not useful. The Valhalla is in the same boat as it. Basically, this vehicle is more similar to what you find on the Grafton, I believe it is, when it comes to at least the gun mounts. But at the same time, the gun mounts are bigger on the Grafton, or the guns themselves. You have these 4 single 4-inch guns, 2 on the front, then you also have 2 on the back, so at least you have a bit more firepower than the standard ones, and you have these weird triangular torpedo tubes as well, plus 176. They added this one in. I can't remember when they added this one in, but I just looked at it, and I remember just going, why? Why was this added, and why was it added as a premium? Which was even more confusing, because they have shrapnel shells on the 102s and also on the 76s, which I found kind of interesting, but also, once again, at the same time, why? Like, once again, no idea why you'd buy this, but it exists, I suppose. The Jervis at 4.3 is not too bad. Wish it was rank 3 like the Hyder, but you can't get everything in life. It's a J-class, and since it's a J-class, you have the nice guns on it, the 4.7s. You get 3 dual mounts, 1 on the back and then 2 on the front. Don't worry about the gun here. It isn't actually blocking the back gun. So what this basically means on the vehicle, that you can easily get all guns on the same target at once, and also you have a quad 40, 4 dual 20s, 2 singles as well, and torpedoes. Like, these torpedoes aren't the best. Usually the issue with the torpedoes for the British stuff is the firing angles on them. You can see that, you know, they're kind of crowded in the center, so you have to fire them like straight off at very, very slim angles. But overall, like, the Jervis is fine. You know, it works really well. I would actually say it's probably better to wait for the Hyder or the Cadiz to come back if you're going to pick up a destroyer premium, though. Belfast is once again okay too. Like, it works fine if you just want something to sit there and just shoot at other targets. Its armor is okay. Its guns are fine. You know, it's not the best vehicle at its BR, but also a lot of the things that are better than it did actually get moved up recently, which was quite nice. So at least there's that. I would actually say it's not a bad pickup for a vehicle, especially if decompression comes in again. The MTB one is terrible. It has Lewis machine guns, which you have to get super close to enemies to actually hurt them with. The MG75 has a 40 on the front and no survivability. It's absolutely terrible and definitely really bad. The Orla is a lot better than it used to be, basically because it actually has access to a lot more survivability nowadays, so that at least improves it a little bit there. I still think it's pretty limited compared to what you could get. And then the Whitby, which is a frigate, which is basically a vehicle which has a dual 4.5 on the front and acts like a lower tier destroyer. It's a fine vehicle. You know, there's a standard tech tree one which is very similar, the Blackpool, but at the same time you don't really get anything from this that you don't get from just grinding the blue water tree for basically 2 seconds. So that kind of sucks for it. You know, it's nice to see, and you know, you can use it to grind out the coastal tech tree, but you're also super limited on what you can actually do with the vehicle. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.